eyes going wide, and held it up on an instinct. Logan swung the sword down with all his strength. He was shocked by the sharpness of it. It took the big man's arm off just below the elbow, then struck into his shoulder, cleaving through the fur and the mail beneath and splitting him to his stomach near in half. Blood showered across the road, spattering in the face of Logan's horse. It was trained for riding, but not for war, and it reared and span around, kicking and plunging in a panic. It was the best Logan could do to stay on top of the damn thing. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Baez smack Wise horse on the rump, and it sped off with the apprentice bouncing in the saddle, the pack horse galloping along behind. Then everything was a mess of plunging and snorting beasts, clashing and scraping metal, curses and cries. Battle. A familiar place, but no less terrifying for that. Logan clung to the reins with his right hand as his horse bucked and thrashed, swinging the sword wildly round his head, more to scare his enemies than hurt them. Every moment he expected the jolt and searing pain as he was stuck through with a spear, then the ground to rush up and smack him in the face. He saw Quai and Baez galloping away down the road, hotly pursued by the tall man, his spear couched under his arm. He saw Black Toe rolling to his feet, spitting blood, scrambling for his axe. He saw the two men who'd come from behind fighting for control of their own twisting horses, spears waving in their hands. He saw the body of the one he'd just killed loll in half and topple slowly out of the saddle, blood pouring out over the muddy ground. Logan squawked as he felt a spear point dig into the back of his shoulder, and he was shoved forward, almost over his horse's head. Then he realized he was facing down the road and still alive. He dug his heels into the flanks of his horse, and it sped away, sending mud flying from its hooves and into the faces of the men behind. He fumbled the sword across into his right hand, nearly dropping the reins and falling into the road. He shrugged his shoulder, but the wound didn't feel too bad. He still moved the arm all right. I'm still alive. Still alive. The road flashed by beneath him, the wind stinging his eyes. He was making ground on the tall man. The rags on his horse's hooves were slowing him down now, slipping on the muddy ground. Logan gripped the hilt of the sword as hard as he could, raised it behind him. The head of his enemy snapped round, but too late. There was a hollow bonk of metal on metal as sword smashed into helmet, leaving a deep dent and sending the tall man sprawling. His head bounced once against the road, foot still caught in one stirrup. Then he came free, tumbled over and over on the grass, arms and legs flopping. His riderless horse galloped on, eyes rolling at Logan as he passed. Still alive.
Yeah, hey there.
Logan looked over his shoulder. Black Toe was back in the saddle and galloping after him, axe raised above his head, tangled hair flying out behind. The two other spearmen were with him, urging their horses forwards, but there was still some distance between them. Logan laughed. Perhaps he'd make it after all. He waved his sword at Black Toe as the road entered a wood in the valley's bottom. I'm still alive, he screamed at the top of his voice, and then his horse pulled up so suddenly that Logan was almost flung over its head. It was only by throwing one arm round its neck that he kept his seat at all. As soon as he fell back into the saddle, he saw the problem. Several tree trunks had been hauled across the road, their branches chopped off and the stumps filed down to vicious points, sticking out in all directions. Two more mailed carls stood in front, spears at the ready. Even the best of horsemen couldn't have jumped that barrier, and Logan wasn't the best of horsemen. Baez and his apprentice had reached the same decision. Both sat still on their horses before the barricade, the old man looking puzzled, the young one simply scared. Logan fingered the grip of his sword and cast desperately around, peering into the trees for some way out. He saw more men now, archers. One, then two, then three of them, creeping slowly forward on both sides of the road, arrows nocked and strings drawn back. Logan turned round in the saddle, but Black Toe and his two companions were trotting up. There was no escape that way. They reined in a few strides away, well out of reach of Logan's sword. His shoulders slumped. The chase was done. Blacktoe leaned over and spat some blood onto the ground. "All right, bloody boy. That's as far as you go." "Funny thing," muttered Logan, looking down at the long grey blade of the sword, gashed and spattered with red. "All that time I fought for Bethard against you, and now you fight for him against me. Seems we're never on the same side, and he's the only winner. Funny thing." "Aye," mumbled Blacktoe through his bloody lips. "Funny." But no one was laughing. Blacktoe and his carls had faces hard as death. Quai looked on the verge of tears. Only Bias, for reasons beyond understanding, still had his customary good humor. "All right, Nine Fingers, get off the horse. Bethard wants you alive, but he'll take you dead if he has to. Down, now!" Logan's thoughts began to turn to how they might escape once he'd given up. Blacktoe wasn't like to make a mistake once he had them. Logan would likely be kicked half to death for the fight he'd given them already, if they didn't take his kneecaps off. They'd be trussed up tight like chickens for the slaughter. He pictured himself flung down on the stones with half a mile of chain around him, Bethard smiling down from his throne, Calder and Scale laughing, probably poking at him with something sharp. Logan looked around. He looked at the cold arrowheads and the cold spear points, and the cold eyes of the men pointing them. There was no way out. "All right, you win." Logan threw his sword down, point first. He had it in mind that it would bite into the soil and stand there, swaying back and forth. But it toppled over and clattered against the dirt. It was their sort of day. He slowly swung one leg over the saddle and slid down into the road. "That's better. Now the rest of you." Quai instantly slithered off his horse and stood there, glancing nervously up at Bias. But the Magus made no move. Blacktoe frowned and hefted his axe. "You too, old man." "I prefer to ride." Logan winced. That was not the right answer. Any moment now, Blacktoe would give the order. The bowstrings would sing, and the first of the Magi would drop into the road, stuck full of arrows, probably still with that infuriating smile on his dead face. But the order never came. There was no word of command, no strange incantation, no arcane gestures. The air around Bias's shoulders seemed to shimmer, like the air above the land on a hot day, and Logan felt a strange tugging at his guts. Then the trees exploded in a wall of searing, blinding, white-hot flame. Trunks burst, branches snapped with deafening cracks, venting plumes of brilliant fire and scalding steam. One burning arrow shot high up into the air over Logan's head, and then the archers were gone, boiled away into the furnace. Logan choked and gasped, reeled back in shock and terror, arm up to ward his face from the blistering heat. The barricade was sending up great gouts of fire and blinding sparks. The two men who had been standing near were rolling and thrashing, wreathed in hungry flames, their screams lost in the deafening roar. The horses plunged and reeled, snorting with mad fear. Blacktoe was flung to the ground for the second time, his flaming axe flying from his hands, and his horse stumbled and fell, crashing down on top of him. One of his companions was even less lucky, thrown straight into the sheets of fire by the road, his despairing cry quickly cut off. Only one stayed upright, and he was lucky enough to be wearing gloves. By some miracle, he kept hold of the burning shaft of his spear. How he had the presence of mind to charge with the world on fire around him, Logan would never know. Strange things can happen in a fight. He chose Quai as his target, bearing down on him with a snarl, the flaming spear aimed at his chest. The witless apprentice stood there helpless, rooted to the spot. Logan barreled into him, snatching up his sword, sending Quai rolling across the road with his hands over his head. Then he chopped mindlessly at the horse's legs as it flashed past him. The blade was torn from his fingers and went skittering away. Then a hoof slammed into Logan's injured shoulder and clubbed him into the dirt. The breath was knocked from him, and the burning world span crazily around. His blow had its effect, though. A few strides further down the road, the horse's hacked front legs gave way, and it stumbled, carried helplessly forward, tumbled and pitched into the flames, horse and rider vanishing together.
Why are you here?
Logan cast about on the ground for the sword. Sizzling leaves whipped across the road, stinging his face and his hands. The heat was a great weight pressing down on him, pulling the sweat out of his skin. He found the bloody grip of the sword, seized hold of it with his torn fingers. He lurched up, staggered round, shouting meaningless sounds of fury, but there was no one left to fight. The flames were gone as suddenly as they'd arrived, leaving Logan coughing and blinking in the curling smoke. The silence seemed complete after the roaring noise. The gentle breeze felt icy cold. A wide circle of the trees around them had been reduced to charred and shattered stumps, as though they had burned for hours. The barricade was a sagging heap of grey ash and black splinters. 2 corpses lay sprawled nearby, barely recognizable as men, burned down to the bones. The blackened blades of their spears lay in the road, the sharps vanished. Of the archers, there was no sign at all. They were shot and blown away on the wind. Quai lay motionless on his face with his hands over his head, and beyond him, Blacktoe's horse lay sprawled out on its side, one leg silently twitching, the other still. "Well," said Baez, the muffled noise making Logan jump. He'd somehow expected there would never be another sound again. "That's that." The first of the Magi swung a leg over his saddle and slid down into the road. His horse stood there, calm and obedient. It hadn't moved the whole time. "There now, Master Quai. You see what can be achieved with a proper understanding of plants?" Baez sounded calm, but his hands were trembling fast. He looked haggard, ill, old, like a man who'd dragged a cart 10 miles. Logan stared at him, swaying silently back and forth, the sword dangling from his hand. "So, that's art, is it?" His voice sounded very small and far away. Baez wiped the sweat from his face. "Of a sort. Hardly very subtle. Still," and he poked at one of the charred bodies with his boot, "subtlety is wasted on the northern end." He grimaced, rubbed at his sunken eyes, and peered up the road. "Where the hell did those horses get to?" Logan heard a ragged groan from the direction of Blacktoe's fallen mount. He stumbled towards it, tripped and fell to his knees, stumbled towards it again. His shoulder was a ball of pain, his left arm numb, his fingers ripped and bleeding. But Blacktoe was in worse shape, much worse. He was propped up on his elbows, legs crushed under his horse right to the hips, hands burned to swollen tatters. He had a look of profound puzzlement on his bloody face as he tried, unsuccessfully, to drag himself from under the horse. "You've fucking killed me," he whispered, staring open-mouthed at the wreckage of his hands. "I'm all done. I'll never make it back. And even if I could, what for?" He gave a despairing laugh. "Bethod ain't half so merciful as he used to be. Better you kill me now, before it starts to hurt. Better all round." And he slumped back and lay in the road. Logan looked up at Baez, but there was no help there. "I'm not much at healing," snapped the wizard, glancing round at the circle of blasted stumps. "I told you, we tend to specialize." He closed his eyes and bent over, hands resting on his knees, breathing hard. Logan thought of the floor in Bethod's hall and the two princes laughing and poking. "All right," he muttered, standing up and hefting the sword. "All right." Blacktoes smiled. "You were right, Nine Fingers. I never should have knelt to Level. Never. Shit on him and his fear. It would have been better to die up in the mountains, fighting him to the last. There might have been something fine in that. I just had enough. You can see that, can't you?" "I can see that," muttered Logan.
Never
I've had enough
anger
myself.
Norn.
"Something fine," said Blacktoe, staring far up into the grey skies.
Never anger a Norn.
"I just had enough. So I reckon I earned this. Fair is fair." He lifted his chin. "Well then, get it done, lad." Logan raised the sword. "I'm glad it's you, Nine Fingers," hissed Blacktoe through gritted teeth. "For what it's worth." "I'm not." Logan swung the blade down. The scorched stumps were still smouldering, smoke curling up into the air, but all was cold now. Logan's mouth tasted salty, like blood. Perhaps he bit his tongue somewhere. Perhaps it was someone else's. He threw the sword down, and it bounced and clattered, shedding red specks across the dirt. Quai gaped around for a moment. Then he folded up and coughed puke into the road. Logan stared down at Blacktoe's headless corpse. "That was a good man. Better than me. History is littered with dead good men." Baez knelt stiffly and picked up the sword, wiped the blade on Blacktoe's coat. Then he squinted up the road, peering through the haze of smoke. "We should be moving. Others might be on their way." Logan looked at his bloody hands, slowly turning them over and over. They were his hands, no doubt. There was the missing finger. "Nothing's changed," he mumbled to himself.
Who goes there?
Baez straightened up, brushing the dirt from his knees. "When has it ever?" He held the sword out to Logan, hilt first. "I think you'll still be needing this." Logan stared at the blade for a moment. It was clean, dull grey, just as it had always been. Unlike him, it showed not so much as a scratch from the hard use. He didn't want it back. Not ever. But he took it anyway. The Blade Itself, Part 2. Life.
What is this creature, Jorah? You seem to know a lot about it.
I know all too much, I'm afraid. My brother and I were both hunters. One day we chased our prey across Drakkar Lake, a place our people normally shun. We found something there.
Do you feel it, Jorah? Something in the air.
All I feel is a chill harsher than any blizzard.
Yes, it is cold, but it also feels ancient. Old and powerful.
This place is cursed, Svanir. Let us leave it.
No. A simple spell should reveal the nature of the power.
I do not know what we contacted that day, but its energies nearly consumed us. I resisted the power, but was cursed by it. I cannot embrace the wild. I can no longer become the bear. My brother seized the power and went mad. He was transformed. He became a creature in flight. My brother now raids the Norn settlements. He avoids me, though I pursue him. I communed with the bear spirit. She wishes you to aid me.
You want us to help find your brother?
No, I want you to help me kill him. Who sent you? Never anger a Norn.